Can you believe it? Part one was just something else, eh? We went into all sorts of rabbit holes, and that's the reason why we have someone like Tendai Biti. You know, we are thoroughly enjoying this, and we get the sort of details that we never get anywhere else. And here's an opening for part two. I hope you guys will actually enjoy this, and as much as we did with part one. And we're continuing with the former honorable.
The very colorful, cantankerous, and cheeky Tendai Biti.
But wealth of information.
Use big words. I don't like big words.
So the first thing is you wanted to kick Gono out of the central bank. That was one condition that you had going into the GNU. But by the end of the GNU, you were now best of friends or closer to best of friends.
No, it wasn't about. It wasn't about Gono the person.
Okay.
And remember, there was also Johannes Tomana. So it wasn't about Gono the person. It wasn't about Johannes Tomana. What happened, you recall, was that we had an election on the 28th of March 2008 where Morgan Changirai won and the MTC. So we got about 100 seats, more than what ZANU-PF got. Then we were forced by SADC to go to a runoff election after SADC had held a conference, an extraordinary summit at Mulungushi International Conference Center in Zambia. Then with the bloody, literally and metaphorically, runoff election on the 28th of June. I was in prison. So charged with treason and so forth. So immediately afterwards, they released me to go and negotiate. They take my passport and say, yeah.
What was that, a negotiation tactic?
Well, they said, get out. And I said, I don't want to keep me in remand. So anyway, they released me. Yeah. So we started negotiating on the 7th of July. The runoff election was on the 28th. By the 7th of July, we were negotiating, and I'm granted bail by the High Court of Zimbabwe. So, and ZANU were serious. So I used to throw tantrums and walk out. They would follow me. Let's negotiate here. But anyway, so this is July. In early August, we signed a memorandum of understanding. And one of the things that we agree in the memorandum of understanding is that, yes, for now the president is Robert Mugabe. But he is not going to make and take any executive decision until such time as the GNU
is formed.
Is formed and the agreement has been signed. So in other words, Robert Mugabe is reduced to just a caretaker, nominal president.
Okay.
But what does wily Robert Mugabe do? He makes executive appointments. The central bank governor
renewed 5 years.
Johannes Tomana appointed as the Attorney General of Zimbabwe. So naturally, these appointments, which were done outside the memorandum of understanding, become issues. So it was not about Gono.
Okay.
It was not about Tomana. It was about President
the principle
having acted ultra vires against the agreement, the memorandum of understanding of July 2008.
Okay.
But I want to come to my relations with the Governor Gono. So we fight, and it's acrimonious, and it's personal. It's rough. So what I did was I sponsor amendments to the Reserve Bank. So I amend Section 6 of the Reserve Bank Act to restrict the functions of the central bank to a bare minimum. Managing the national payment system, managing the
banks,
managing the exchange rate, and supervising the banks. So I remove all those things like advising the government and so forth. the bill gets stuck in Parliament. We pushed it in the National Assembly, but the Senate refuses to sign it. And the key culprit is Mrs. Mchang. She refuses. And the MDC is a minority in the Senate because of traditional leaders.
Okay.
I had to go to President Mugabe. And the way I sold it to him was, but this is your bill, Mr. President. You approved it. So they're not defying me.
They're defying
They're
you.
defying you, Mr. President. Surely they can't defy you, Mr. President. That's how I sold it. And I went with Elton Mangoma. Elton Mangoma was in that meeting with Robert Mugabe. So I said, Mr. President, you are the president of the republic. The last time I checked, they can't defy you. So that's how we got the amendment to the Reserve Bank. One of the fine things which we did, which I'm very proud of, is that we amended Section 49 of the Reserve Bank Act and said the Reserve Bank can't lend unless it's supported by actual physical reserves. They've retained, Chinamaza repealed it, now they've retained it right now. That same provision, which basically makes it impossible for the Reserve Bank to engage in quasi-fiscal activities.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm very proud of that provision. But anyway, to come back to Governor Gono. So once that had been done, once the Act had been amended,
it thawed relations. Okay.
No, actually what thawed relations was that one day Governor Gono came to my office. So I used to do my work from an iPad.
Yes, I remember that. And it was early days. I think the iPad was first released 2010.
Yeah.
And I would see you on TV presenting from an iPad. And I
So
thought,
everything, yeah, exactly. And their presentations are much better than Microsoft presentations. So I used to enjoy the graphics and so forth. So he sees me typing things, and I show him. So I show him the hard side.
Okay.
The programs and so forth. Then I show him the entertainment, I show him the books and so forth. So the iPad made us friends,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's an Apple fan as well.
Exactly. But then I think the reality was that Treasury can't operate without a central bank, even if one is limited monetary policy because we're dollarized, but you still need each other. And one of the finest things about the central bank was that they had fine researchers, they were fine people there, which I made use of, and they were very quick. So you would say, Governor, I need a paper on this, a research on this. And you would tell, I will bring it.
It says something a lot about you that you didn't personalize it. I mean, the bromance that because you actually eventually had a bromance with Gono, especially on the indigenization, because he wrote quite scathing.
No, you know what I've learned is that don't personalize these issues. Be guided by principle. Be guided by principle. So I differ with the ZANU-PF and colleagues with ZANU-PF on matters of principle. But in the past 5 years, if you trace what we did in Parliament, particularly when we came back after the runoff, after the by-elections of 26 March, was that we made so much progress in that Parliament, even though we were few, by purely arguing on principles. So we had so much disproportionate influence into the laws, into the legislation. Because I would sit with Minister Ziyambi and say, Minister Ziyambi, you're a lawyer. This can't work. This can't work. This can't work. This can't work. And we made so much progress. Just by putting the force of argument, thought leadership, the force of argument.
So let's talk about ESSA. Why didn't ESSA happen? I mean, deals were signed, everything was signed.
Yeah.
They even had,
So just for the purposes of the audience, I think ESSA is the biggest deal that was signed during the GNU. It was
$700 million.
$700 million US. It had to do with building a steel, reviving Cisco Steel, And I think what eventually broke the deal was that the iron ore mine, I think it's called Redcliffe, was part of the deal, and then eventually the government decided that
it shouldn't be part of it.
It's not part of the deal, and then the whole thing came apart at the seams.
Yeah. So part of the problem of a GNU is that unless the leadership, in this case Morgan and Mugabe, diffuse the perpetual competition between the two conflicting parties. So in South Africa, John Steenhuisen and Cyril are going to be key because there is a tendency of competing. And cabinet, by its very nature, tends to be silo. The constitution says it's collective, but ministers tend to act and behave in a silo manner. So they leave the room and go and consult with the president. They don't bring an issue in the subject collectively, which I think is bad. So Zisco Steel, the plant, fell under the Ministry of Trade. So it fell under Minister Welshman Ncube. But the iron ore that feeds into Zisco falls under the Minister
of Mines.
Now,
and it was Obed Mpofu.
Okay. So the tragedy that arose is that Welshman brilliantly negotiated. They issued like a tender. So 3 companies, ESA and 2 Chinese companies, Senior Steel and so forth, bid for Zisco. But ESA had a much superior offer because it was going to involve cash upfront to the Zimbabwean government of almost $1 billion, about 700 million. So we could have used that. In addition to refurbishing, particularly furnace number 4, which, as you know, is a mess. What they did was at Zisco.
Okay.
They let it dry, the molten dried. So it's a huge chunk of So ESA was going to do that. ESA was also going to do a road, a new airport in the Midlands, Manise, what we are now calling Manise.
Yes.
A new road and so forth to go to Beira, because they were going to ferry the ore by pipeline, put it into water and so forth. And they were also going to make and develop Beira into a deep sea port. It's not a deep sea port. So it was a very attractive arrangement because it was going to create spatial linkages and so forth. However, for ESA to invest that huge amount of money, they needed a guarantee
that the throughput would come from the iron ore.
Of the ore. And as you know, Zimbabwe has got about 40 billion tons of iron ore underground in that whole Midlands area, including where Manise is.
Okay.
Obed Mpofu then refused to sign off the ore, not necessarily all of it. There were 3-4 areas which they required. He refused. And unfortunately, he persuaded President Mugabe to accept that unacceptable position. Ironically, Manise has now been given, at no senator, at no meaningful investment, access to these same resources that were denied ESA 10 years ago.
Would you say it's a factionalism playing?
It's more the dynamics of a government of national unity.
Okay.
You are in constant competition.
Okay. Yeah. So then let's talk about Chiadzwa.
So Chiadzwa, what happens in Chiadzwa is that in 2006, De Beers fails to renew, April 2006, fails to renew its a special grant. So they lapse. and a company called ACR, Africa Consolidated Resources,
Yes.
grabs those resources. So now mining law...
But they didn't grab. They paid for it.
Well, it's a metaphor.
We don't want to be sued again.
It's a metaphor. It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, they acquired those results. So they acquired those rights. They deny that they were mining. But there's evidence which the Minister of Mines has that tons and tons and tons of soil were being extracted.
As samples.
But in fact, but incidental, De Beers had been doing the same thing. So from the 60s, De Beers had also been extracting tons and tons of samples.
Has this been fact-checked? Do we know this?
Yes, because for any sample to be taken out of the country, the Minister of Mines must actually sign
it
the
off.
Minister of Mines.
Okay.
So this Minister of Mines actually has
All the paper.
these approvals. I've seen them. Because at one stage, Obed Mpofu says, but we should sue De Beers. They must account for all this. Because how do you sample every month? And every month, tons and tons of soil
Are being shipped out of the country.
are being shipped. So the Minister of Mines has got those records. So those records. Unfortunately for ACR, its business partner was Solomon Mujuru. So in ZANU, Solomon Mujuru was blamed for ZANU's loss of the 2008 elections. Yeah. So Mugabe could not hear of ACR, despite judgments in their favor and so forth. So early by March, Obed Mpofu has come with two agreements. One for Grandwell Holdings, I think is Bada.
Yes.
And another one, Conchurango and so forth. Two agreements.
The Chinese one, yeah.
So he presents them before cabinet. And Elton Mangoma and I tear apart these agreements. Because the only money that these companies were putting up front was $5 million US. I said, but you can't. How do you sell a special grant? If you've done due diligence, do you know what is there? And so forth. But anyway, the agreements pass. And in no time at all, we have Mbada, and we have this Conjurang, the local guy, I can't remember his name, but they cancelled.
The colonel.
No, Muhlanga is in
Robert Mbada.
Is in
Then
Mbada.
Engine.
Then there's Anjin. Then there's a third guy. My memory is good. Yeah, but they cancelled his agreement. In fact, they took over the mine. So the Kimberley process then moves into blacklist our diamonds. So we now have a huge stockpile of diamonds
That we can't sell.
but we can't sell. So Mpofu is then forced to come to cabinet. And the Kimberley process requires the Minister of Finance to be involved. So I become intricately involved. I was lucky in that the Kimberley process then appoints two persons
Okay.
as point persons. So these persons must mark off the parcels to be sold. So one of them was a Belgian national. One of them was a South African national. The Belgian national was an expert in diamonds. So he sits with me and he tells me that the diamond find in Marange is a miracle. So he explains how that sediment was created. So he says, picture a sediment. So picture a whirlwind. So a whirlwind goes, wheel, And so picture a whirlwind that turns and then deposits whatever it has.
Settles.
And settles.
And
that's
it
what
settles
happened.
at Chiadzo.
Yeah, so this was not a whirlwind, it's actually the ocean. The
oceans,
sea.
okay.
So the ocean develops that. So sediments then accumulate at a particular point. Billions of centuries ago. So that's what had happened in Chiadzo. But this sediment is not permanent, it's ephemeral. To run out, it has got a lifespan of 25 years.
Okay.
So he gives the projection that if you manage this asset well, you'll make $60 billion. If you manage this asset well.
Okay.
Yeah. So so they are signing off, and I know that we are now selling huge parcels. So first year, 2010, he accounts, Pofu, the Minister of Mines accounts for $274 million US. Very happy. I'm very happy. But somewhere along the line, a political decision was taken that we can't give money
To Treasury.
to Treasury. So thereafter, I'm getting $5 million US. But unfortunately, the money was going to crooks.
Well, let's not say crooks.
You can edit. You can edit.
We don't want to be editing the entire. Money was going elsewhere.
It was not going to governments.
Okay.
It was going to parallel sources. Some of them were state institutions or controlled by state institutions. So it was going to individuals, parallel institutions. So even after the GNU had collapsed, that infrastructure of extraction was not dismantled. So ironically, Chinamasa as well, who succeeds me,
Inherits the same.
And begins to sound like the broken record that I had become vis-a-vis diamonds. Because he never got anything. Until such time as those resources.
But during your time, you got as much as 600 million. I think 2013.
No. Absolutely not. 274 million in 2010 was the highest amount we got.
Really?
In dividends or royalties, what was it?
It was
in partnership, because remember, all the companies were in partnership with government.
No. Yeah, well, the initial agreements, we were not in partnership.
Okay.
But we had our own company. But afterwards, when the GNU collapsed, they then tried to force all these companies to become one
consolidated,
company, consolidate them and so forth. So we never got anywhere. The highest amount of money we got was 274 million in 2010. Okay. Then after those 5 million.
So where was Mugabe coming up with 15 billion, saying 15 billion had been lost during that 5-year period in Chiadzo?
I think
was that just hyperbole?
You see, Mugabe came close to the cartels that were looting Chiadzo. And some people actually argue that one of the reasons why the coup happened was that Mugabe had come closer to the truth of what had happened to our diamond resources and was going to take action. And remember, in October of 2017, he actually went to China to see President Xi, and one of the issues that was on the table was that, but there's money coming from Zimbabwe.
Why would he suddenly be interested in diamonds when China, during, I think, the GNU, remember Jack Ma?
My suspicion
not Jack Ma. You remember the Chinese?
Jack Ma. What is in your orange juice?
You remember the Chinese? The guy was in Angola. The Chinese Sempa.
The owner of, he's now in prison.
Exactly. And if I remember correctly, the Chinese actually wanted the Zimbabwean government to come in and be a witness in those particular trials, and we refused to be part of those discussions.
So Sempa was connected to a company called Signozim, but he was not involved in
Chiadzo.
No, Anjin is owned by a Chinese military company called Norelengo, which is worth 90 billion US dollars. So it's essentially a military establishment that answers some of the questions you got about where money went.
That's our cue to move on. Now, let's talk about the banking sector during that period. Yes. So when you started, we were fully dollarized, and whatever money was in our banking system was exactly cash and notes within. But by the time we got to the end of the GNU, you had total deposits of about $3.8 billion.
$6.2 billion.
Let's work with the official numbers, which is $3.8 billion.
No, but he's got... The 6.2 billion is
fixed.
No. Total deposits in the banking system by the end of 2013 were $3.8 billion. Right? And then of that, about 20% was actual physical notes and coins. So the argument that your other counterparts make is you started printing. So the printing of RTGS actually started during the GNU years. And because all those deposits were not fully backed by hardcore cash and notes.
I don't know where you're getting your 3.8, because it was actually 6.2. The reason why we had a problem, so we never printed because we never ran a budget deficit.
Banks print money. So
it's credit creation. It's not printing.
Yeah, credit creation that banks were doing, which got to about 3.8. A lot of it were bad debts, which you then created. What was it called? To house all the bad debts within the banking sector. Zamco.
Yeah.
You had,
that was post GNU.
That was post GNU.
Okay.
That was the problem.
The argument is it was created during the GNU years. This was the rot that was created during the GNU years.
Let me tell you what happened.
And what you simply did was to kick the can down the road. And then now Chinamasa had to deal with these issues.
Far from it. Despite the capacity of banks to create credit, they've got prudential levels that limit this capacity of creating credit. And a lot of the money that came into the economy from 2009 was actually external money, because we liberalized the capital account. And I announced that bring in any money you want, we won't ask you any questions. And you can take as much money as you want, and we won't ask you any questions. And one of the things that many people don't know is that when you liberalize the capital account, you actually have more inflows
than outflows.
Mm-hmm. The reason being is very simple. It's confidence. It's confidence. So we establish confidence by the liberalization of the capital account. We established the confidence by the fact that we had controlled the macroeconomic disequilibrium, inflation, negative rates of interest, budget deficits. So money flowed into Zimbabwe in the form of diaspora remittances, in the form of foreign direct investment, in the form of overseas development assistance, which was about $1 billion a year. Mm-hmm. We also, you see, when a country is well run.
Gentlemen, some water, please.
I'm good. I'll stick to the.
Okay.
You also increase compliance. Mm-hmm. When a country is well run, you also increase compliance, and you can see this by the structure of our tax. That we started off with the, excise duty, customs duty being like 60% of the taxes. But by the time that we'd gone to a normal tax structure, normal pie chart where individual taxes, payee and corporate tax are the thing. So that meant that there was money in this economy because of that confidence. Mm-hmm. What happened after the collapse of the GNU, and this is fact, was that number one, these guys abandoned cash budgeting, abandoned living within their means. So they do two things. Number one, they created an overdraft with the central bank of about 3.8 billion US dollars. But the central bank is broke. So what the central bank actually did was to raise the deposits in banks. So a bank robbery took place. So you had the overdraft.
I think I'm going to push back.
So what you...
I'm going to push back a lot.
Yeah, let me finish on this. So you had a situation where, and by the way, the Public Accounts Committee in 2020 produced a report on the Reserve Bank on why we ended up introducing the bond note in May, on the 4th of May 2016, is because there was no money, there was no real money to support the money in the system, so they had to create a fiat currency.
No, I don't want to go that far. I want to get to a stage, and hopefully we'll have Chinamasa on the show as well, and we'll get into these details. But Chinamasa is inheriting bank deposits that are 3.8 billion, and they are bad loans. We don't know what the amount of those bad loans are, because you can't say in 2015 then you start creating the bad loans. The bad loans, this was during your time. They are bad loans, and these bad loans are what then became part of Zamco.
We have less than 10% of non-performing loans before 2013.
The argument is you were kicking the can down the road.
No.
Right? No. So when Chinamasa gets in...
No, it's factually incorrect.
When Chinamasa gets in...
It's factually incorrect. It's factually incorrect.
So are you saying that 2015 suddenly all the bad loans become due in 2015? Because remember, it's accumulative, right? And this happened during the GNU.
Remember, there is one bank which was responsible for 60% of the non-performing stock of non-performing loans in the country.
Yes.
And it was the CBZ.
Yes.
And you know why? The GNU did not give agricultural handouts. There was no command agriculture. Command agriculture is created
2016
after the GNU. But what does the command agriculture do? Command agriculture shifts and is financed by the CBZ Bank.
But that's 2016. We're talking about 2014. Immediately after Chinamasa takes in and realizes that the banking system is fragile. And that's why you create Zamco.
No.
Why are you creating Zamco?
Zamco is created 2016, 2017. Zamco is created to house loans and defaults created from 2014 to 2016. That 2-year period is a disaster.
Anyway, we can fact check this.
It's factual.
Can somebody fact check when was Zamco created?
Yeah, check.
Let's do that. Let's do that immediately. Somebody please tell me when Zamco was actually created.
Remember, the person who creates Zamco is John Panonetsa Mangu. After he has been appointed Central Bank governor.
In 2013.
And John knows the disaster because John has been the chief executive of the CBZ. And the CBZ is the grandmother of the non-performing loans in this country at the time.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting take.
So Zamco was created in July 2014. So this is what I mean. It was created in July 2014 because these bad loans were created during the GNU years.
No.
Well, look, that's a rabbit hole, and I think we can explore it.
Yeah, we'll explore that one.
That's factually not correct.
So that's the number one criticism against you, that these bad loans were actually created then.
No.
Then the
Actually,
second,
that's not the number one criticism.
no,
against.
I'll put. I'm just listing. I'm not saying
that's your perspective.
I'm listing. I'm not saying that's the top one. I'm saying number one criticism is on bad loans, that these bad loans were actually created under your watch during the GNU. Then the second criticism is that a lot of our debts, international debts, Chinamasa was the first one to then have to start servicing, more primarily the Chinese debt, because if you remember, there was in 2014 Chinamasa had to pay about 175 million to the Chinese, which had not been paid during the GNU years.
Let me explain. Let me explain. The Chinese debt is insignificant during the time of the GNU. It is insignificant. It's not there at all. What's there is less than US $200 million.
Yes.
So when you look,
but it was due and payable.
Yeah. Let me finish. So when you look at all the literature that deals with our debt sustainability levels, China doesn't feature because it's insignificant. The biggest creditors being the Paris Club of Lenders, $5 billion, the World Bank, $2 billion, the African Development Bank, $600 million. But China doesn't feature. But China has small loans that it has given to Zimbabwe. One of them is a loan that Made got in or around 2006 for US $200 million. And that loan, I was quite close with it when I came across the papers, because they mortgaged a piece of land measuring 104 square kilometers in the Selu area, a platinum asset. And if you put the cost of platinum per ounce in the 104, you were getting like the nominal value was like $58 billion.
My gosh.
I did the maths. So I said, these guys are crazy. That you securitize an asset that is worth $58 billion for a $200 million loan. And I tried to have that cancelled. And by the way, a mortgage bond was actually registered in our title deeds for that thing. Which is why I'm totally against the securitization of mineral resources to secure. Then we had a debt that was acquired by a private company called Farmers World. So Farmers World was owned by a crony called Raradza.
No, you're a lawyer. Yeah. We don't want to be.
No, but it's fact that the company existed.
Yeah.
And the debt was,
Let's not be
securitized.
Yeah. No, this was not securitized.
Yeah, but let's not be.
But this loan, unfortunately, remember, debt contraction in Zimbabwe is very strict. It has to be approved by Parliament. It has to be signed off by Treasury. And most importantly, well, not most importantly, one of the things that has to come is a letter from the Attorney General that says due process has been followed. This letter did not follow due process.
Okay.
So I refused to honor this Farmers World. But the irony is the Chinese are excellent debt collectors.
Yes.
Unlike the West. So they would, I don't know how many times I was called to Mugabe's office to say, but why are you not paying the Chinese? And I would say to him, in the national finance law, he has got a principle called pari passu, equal treatment. And it requires that all creditors must be treated equally. So if I pay $10 million to the Chinese, I must also concurrently pay
everyone else
$10 million to them.
A proportionate amount,
I simply can't afford that. The reason why Chinamasa paid is not because we had not serviced the debt. It was because the Chinese would dangle. They did that to me. They would dangle a loan of $2 billion and say, and say,
pay this 200 million.
Just pay this little amount.
And then why are you?
It will unlock $2
It
billion.
will unlock this amount. So they play that game to Chinamasa. It never materialized. But they're excellent. One of the things that they did to me was to invite me to China. And I said, I will never go back to China. They will expose you to a 17-course meal. I said, this can be normal. But anyway, it's a story for another day.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then the other criticism, you can come in with your criticism, but the one that I want us to pick on is your relationship with business people. Because there were many people who feel you had a strong personal relationship with them before GNU, but during the GNU period, you became a different person.
It's the first time I've heard. What I used to do is...
and the argument is you didn't have an open door policy as far as business was concerned.
No, actually I heard, but there was T4 in cabinet. So you remember industry falls under line ministries.
Okay.
So if it's the hospitality industry, it falls under the Ministry of Tourism. If it's mining houses, they fall under the Ministry of Mines.
Okay.
If it's normal manufacturing companies, they fall under
Industry and Commerce.
Industry and Commerce. There is no direct industry under the Ministry of Finance. So what used to happen is that each time I met a company or I met a sector, because I would meet sectors, the following Tuesday there will be complaints from a line minister say, this one saw these people behind my back. And the person who constantly used to come to my aid was Hebit Muriero. Who said, but guys, you can't do that. The Minister of Finance has a right to do that. The Minister of Finance has got a right to see those people. So, but what would then happen now is that those companies now would then be called and receive a verbal hiding from certain actors. I won't mention them because they're still alive. So there was always tension, and it's one of the challenges of a GNU.
Okay.
This inherent competition.
So my biggest gripe.
But what I used to do is I used to follow closely the consumer price index and the statistics produced by Zimstat. So if there is a little movement in one basket, I didn't care about the line minister. I would call them. So with retailers, there was a time that we had a shortage of cooking fat and we had a spike in the price of cooking fats. And I summoned the manufacturers, about 4 or so companies that manufacture cooking fat in Zimbabwe, and the retailers. They came to the boardroom. And the problem was very simple. The manufacturers complained that we are competing with South African products that are coming into the country duty-free. Why don't you give us duty-free on the cake, the soya cake that we used to make, soap and cooking fat, and we are interested in it. So that's just an example of.
Then there's the royalties, the mining royalties that you came in and you increased the mining royalties to 5%. I think it was Chinamasa who actually reduced it, but that was very punishing to the miners.
No. The context has to be understood. The context has to be understood. We have an archaic legal mining regime, incorporated taxation mining regime, incorporated in one of the schedules of our income tax. There's a thing called special initial allowance. So the net effect of this SI special initial allowance is that if you are a mining house in Zimbabwe and you have to pay corporate tax, you must fire your accounting, because that schedule allows you to basically not pay tax. So what I did was I asked from Zimra all the big boys, the big mining houses, the taxes that they'd paid, literally in the last 20 years, and the bar payee, there was nothing. Because of that.
SIA.
Yeah. So what I did then was
it's capital allowance, because a lot of the big mining houses are pouring in billions of money.
That's what they say. That's what they say.
But that's the reality.
Yeah,
you can see them.
That's what they say. That's what they say. You can't say that of Rio Tinto, which has been here for 100 years. You understand? So but there's, how does a mine that has been here since 1940 still claim special initial allowance? It doesn't make sense. I can understand Zimplats, but Zimplats is its own arrangement, which they fall foul as well with the taxman. But anyway, to come to this, So I had qualitative, empirical data on the tax contributions of these mining houses. So there were options available to me. One of them, which I didn't like, was increasing corporate tax. My idea was actually following the example of Georgia, was that we should actually have a flat rate of corporate tax of 15%. Wherever that has been introduced, it has actually shown that there will be more compliance and increase
and more investment.
Yeah, true.
So we then reached with the industry an agreement very much later on the royalties that they were paying.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the context. But what I then did was I then moved to amend the Income Tax Act, and to amend Section 8, on source and residence. So I moved to approved by cabinet, but Mugabe didn't sign it. So what you then ironically have is that you've got one of the best tax laws you can find anywhere in the world sitting in Zimbabwe, but no one is bothered to.
Right. So, Babiti, now what we're going to do is a little different, just to throw you off and see if we can manage to just throw you off a bit. We want you to rate the ministers in the GNU. Right. So we're not going to go to, let's talk about the top 3 and the bottom 3. Outside of yourself, who do you think was a good minister? Top 3, and then give us your worst ministers, bottom 3.
I'll start with the bottom. I think Obed Mpofu. I think
please.
Yeah, per my top performers, I think that Henry Mazurera, Minister of Health, top minister. David Coulthard, Minister of Education, top minister. I also think that.
Well, I would ask you to exercise your mind.
Atham Tambara.
Adam Tambara.
Yeah, he didn't have a ministry.
Okay.
But I think that Atham Tambara is a like him or not like him. He's an asset to our country. He pushes. So he's one of those persons that I he should have a future role in this country. I think the West was clearly Obed Mpofu, but Ignatius Chombo was terrible, and I think that there were people who offered no contribution. Francis Nema.
Okay.
Offered no contribution at all.
So I want you to reach out across the aisle. Who on the ZANU-PF side do you think performed really well?
I think that Joseph Madi. Yeah, Joseph Madi separated the land reform program.
Okay.
But as an agriculturalist and as a person who ran agriculture, he was a very impressive minister. What I liked about Joseph Madi more than is that he authentically knew his subject. I mean, he was a joy to listen. If he starts talking about diseases affecting plants, you know, he was a joy to listen to. So I had great time for.
Okay. He was a technocrat.
He was a technocrat.
That's the reason why
for,
he
for,
was
for,
actually.
for Joe Made. I had a time for Joe Made, and I suspect he also had time for me because I also had an excellent working relationship with Nicholas Koche. You know, the country's infrastructure. So we used to agree on a project and then do the project. For instance, the rehabilitation of the Plumtree Forbes,
Border post.
Yeah. It's the best road in the country. It cost us $260 million, but it was Wales
900 kilometers.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We tried to dualize Harare Marondera. Where we left is where the road still is. But Goche knew he had that vision. Okay. So I had time for him. I found there were people that were authentic in terms of their love for the country. Mrs. Temisonyoni.
Okay.
You know, you might not agree with what she's doing, but you had no doubt that it is coming from a right spot. But I need to speak of Robert Mugabe as well.
Okay, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, you know, the first days was that I would look at this man, bespectacled Victorian gentleman who spoke English with the finest accent you can find outside Eton, putting on Savile Row suits, very unflappable, typical gentleman. So I couldn't reconcile that Robert Mugabe with the Robert Mugabe who had jailed me, killed thousands of people in Gukurahundi and so forth. There was a contradiction. But as I got to know him, I learned that he respected intellect. I also got to realize that something which I said, I gave an interview to Nom Sankara of the Sunday Mail, and I said, this man is a national asset, but regrettably, we Zimbabweans will only know his value when he's gone, because things are going to be terrible. Little did I know that we would be in this situation. Because I then realized that he actually was a victim of factions. And at any material time, he was balancing factions at that time.
You're not contradicting yourself. You said he was, earlier in our interview, in part one, you said the guy was 100% powerful. He was the center of authority. Now you're saying that he was balancing.
The two are not exclusive.
Okay, maybe explain to us.
He had the final say. He had the final say. But he knew the undercurrents. He knew discussions that would take place behind his doors. Okay. He knew his people and what they wanted in the balancing act. So the two are not contradictory, at all. Okay. So when I at some stage, I think he kind of regarded me as a Muzukuru. Because he would, I would have liberties with him, even in cabinet. So I remember, so I would say things to him which ZANU-PF people would get shocked.
This is in cabinet
or cabinet? In cabinet. Yeah.
Give us.
There was a time that I said to him, they discussed women. Then I said, but Mdara, it was a joke. It was a joke. The other people, ZANU-PF people didn't take it. But he just said to me, but Biti, you only need to he just laughed it. But he also, I used to, because I came from practice as a lawyer. So lawyering is a very individualistic job. You research on your own, you draw pleadings, you prepare heads of arguments, you go and argue on your own, you do a contract on your own. So, you can't delegate because people have come to you, the person to do a particular task. And with what I do, most of the time it's Like I'm a lawyer's lawyer, you know.
Okay.
People ask me to do difficult things. So that's the mindset that I carried. So he said two things to me. He said, number one, why are you driving yourself? Don't drive yourself. Number two, why are you, because I used to go home like my 11, used to work. And government is busy. There'll be like millions of
Things
mail,
to do.
yeah, and sensitive things and so forth. And then during the day, it's just meetings. And the worst thing is being called to speak at this conference, at NCC and whatnot. And I
Oh no, you can't disparage ZNCC.
I'm not disparaging. But I'm just capturing the demands
the day.
of yeah. And of course, the most important thing from my point of view and from the point of view of any finance minister is the budget. Yeah, it is the budget. So if you look at the budget during the GNU, you can actually see my style, how I speak. I'm a student of literature, so you can.
Can I quote you?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I picked up certain things which I thought was okay. So this is what you said in 2013. And this is your introduction, and I could actually pick it up.
Budget.
Yeah, budget.
Yeah.
And you said, and this is in paragraph 4, you said, against the odds, the construct has lasted. This is talking of the GNU. And indeed, it is a tribute to the people of Zimbabwe and their political leadership that despite the salubrious challenges that we face, the government of national unity has held out, and we stand here to redefine through this budget a new path and trajectory for our development. And then in another sentence or another paragraph, you say the experiences of the GNU also demonstrate the infallibility of the contention that the socio-economic policy choices we make, our vision, our honesty, our value system, or our craft competence, consistency, inclusivity, and transparency are the difference between the failure and success. In simple terms, development and prosperity and underdevelopment and poverty are byproducts of the choices we make.
Yeah, that's me. That's typical me. So
I could pick it up your language.
Yeah. So I used to because it was my budget. So I would develop a theme and dictate particularly the introductions up to the macroeconomic framework, and then the boring things where they report mining performed this, I would leave it to the technocrats. So the budget is a very difficult document to write. It's a very difficult document to write because it's directing the country. So we used to. So it requires time, and I'm very grateful to Willard Manungo. He is a fine economist, but most importantly, he's a very fair man. He's an individual. You will say, Minister, what do you want to put in your budget? Because he understood that the minister carries the cane, and Section 7
of the policy
of the Public Finance Management Act says the function, the role of the minister is to develop the macroeconomic framework of the country. But he Manungo is such an excellent editor. If he edits something, there will not be a comma out of place. So I owe him a lot during. I know I'm
digressing.
The other
it's a rabbit hole. It doesn't matter.
The other person that I owe a lot is the late Judith Matsorera. So government has got traps, things that you can do innocently and bona fide, but that can get you into trouble. You understand? So there was a time that, because what I used to do is, at the beginning of the year, I would put money in a single fund to pay bonuses. The 13th check.
Why do you believe in 13 checks?
I believe in that because we were paying people so poorly. We were paying $100 a month. So giving them
no, but okay, yeah. I'm going to push back quite aggressively there, because this is one of my gripes. He got to expunge his gripes, and he didn't, as Anchor, afford me the opportunity to
please go
do the same. So I have two gripes. and this is one of them, which is
Bonus.
no, not the bonuses. So if you look at what civil servants were taking home when things were really bad in 2008, right? There's some civil servants were making less than $1 a month, right? It was awful. It was appalling, incredibly tragic.
Yeah.
And I think in January 2009, we had this voucher system, and then they were on $100, right? And then obviously as the months went by and government revenues improved, you improved
The salaries.
the wages.
Yes.
Until we got to $500.
$545.
And these were we had the highest paid civil servants
In Africa.
in Africa.
No. That's not correct. What you see, what was key for me was to keep the wage bill under 7%. Under 7%
Or GDP.
of GDP, and to keep it under 30% of total expenditure. So at any given time, that is what I would, because I would have discussions with our negotiators in the Apex Council, which is the collective job forum between government and its employees. So my guidelines was, guys, we're trying to keep expenditure below 7% of GDP and below.
Those
So
matrix.
my problem was not the money I paid. My problem was that there was constant and continuous recruitment of personnel, particularly in the army and particularly in the police. So you're dealing with a figure, 45,000. Next month it's 80,000. So there was a time that one of the ministers actually threatened to send a battalion to me because I refused to pay. So we then agreed and we were to go to President Mugabe to say, look, we are freezing. And for some time we managed to do that. Then I insisted that there to be an audit of the public service, which was done by first Officer Mkono Eshuro, may his soul rest in peace, but completed by Mrs. Lucia Matibeng. It was a good audit. It was done by Price Waterhouse India. They're the ones who came and did it for us. So the problem now with that thing was that it carried out an audit for civil servants. And it picked out that in May of 2008, just before the runoff election, about 29,000 youth officers had been recruited by the youth ministry. But where the real challenge was in the security sector, they were not allowed to go there. And I suspect that this government is actually employing around 600,000 civil servants. So the problem was not what we were paying. It was this continuous recruitment in the intelligence, in the police, and in the
No, but for $500 a month, which is what civil servants want, what teachers, nurses, and your typical run-of-the-mill civil servant is saying should be the basic.
Yeah, but it's not the highest. It's not the highest on the African continent.
Well, in sub-Saharan Africa, that's higher than what South African.
South Africa is a little higher.
It's even Kenya. Even Kenya
Kenya only has about one.
What I used to do.
I'm talking about the wage at 500 US.
Yes. Yeah, what I used to do was I used to have and I can picture this graph where I used to make a qualitative comparisons with other African countries. Yes, we were on the high side, but we were not.
I thought Rufaro, you're going to argue on a bloated government. Because if we look at
so the government is bloated, but it was also paying
Kenya,
more than it should.
Kenya employs far less civil servants, right, than Zimbabwe, and yet it's 5 times bigger
problem
economy.
In this country, the problem in this country, unlike Kenya, unlike South Africa, is that we don't have a functional, full economy, manufacturing sector that absorbs. And the tragedy is that the government is the biggest employer, which is not the case in South Africa, which is not the case in all functional economies. So the challenge is that let's expand this economy in real terms. And you, the private sector, are to blame as well, because we have so-called captains of industries. We have billionaires in inverted commas in this country. We have people driving Lamborghinis and Maseratis. The other day I was driving in Samora Macho, coming from my house, and my ears were blocked by a Maserati going brrr, in this country, who are not creating wealth. We have got an entrepreneur whose business is cronyism, whose business is to loot from the government, whether it's 87 million US dollars granted for a gold contract and so forth. People are not creating wealth. People are not creating
Fair
wealth.
enough.
And that is the challenge with this country.
Okay, so sorry to cycle back because you were on.
So if I'm an entrepreneur, I will take pride in buying Agriculture Finance Corporation or this bank. But why can't I create my own wealth? So we have created a coterie of so-called business people whose function is just to
rent seek
and parasite the state. We're not creating wealth.
That's true.
So we are a capitalist country, but without capital.
So
Particularly in business.
Tinashe kind of shut down the conversation earlier on, where I was asking you where you are on the spectrum, right? Because me and Tinashe were libertarians. We believe in a government that is as small as possible, with the smallest footprint, and a private sector that fulfills and services the market.
I've no
and then obviously there's the Marxist worldview.
Well, look, you know.
On the other spectrum, where do you stand?
Yeah, look. I've the reason why Eastern Europe collapsed is because there was state capitalism, and it didn't work, and it couldn't work, and the Berlin Wall fell. So I strongly believe that there is no better engine for creating wealth than markets. However, we live in a dual enclave economy where the productive economy is a tiny component. This productive economy, anywhere and elsewhere in the world, has never been good in attending to the public utility obligations of the state, education, for instance. So, to answer you, I believe in what is called a democratic developmental state, which plays what is called a Bonapartist role, which is the role of ensuring that those social sectors which the markets cannot look after are looked after, particularly the public utility, hospitals, schools, gross capital formation,
but give us
and so forth.
Give us real world examples, because I understand where you're coming from.
Western Europe, Sweden, Denmark, they are Bonapartist states.
Okay, so I love that. I love that you've mentioned Western Europe and you've used them as an example for this. So before they got to where they are today, right? I can tell you for a fact, and this is not controversial, right? To create the wealth that allows them to be nanny states and give people these handouts, right? For decades during the Industrial Revolution, you had children working in mines. You had pregnant women working in mines. They were working. No.
You're not saying
I'm not saying that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. What I'm saying, the point that I want to make and drive home is that they are able to do these things today because they are wealthy.
Yeah.
But they so they're not there.
It doesn't mean.
But we are not wealthy. We are poor.
It doesn't mean that we have to arrive at destination wealthy before we start some distribution agenda, which is imperative, education, health, and so forth.
I'll make the
it
case that,
doesn't mean that
a redistribution agenda holds back free market capitalism.
No.
And holds back growth.
I beg to differ.
And we won't get there.
Gentlemen.
I beg to differ. A redistributive agenda not supported by a corresponding expansion of the productive base kills the economy. And that was the problem of Zimbabwe. Mugabe inherits a fantastic economy. He goes on a redistributive agenda without expanding the economy. So the pace of redistribution grew faster than the pace of that was the problem.
Than the pace of
That was
growth.
the problem.
Okay, we're now getting into another.
Balance that.
Okay, so I want.
And if you don't do that, you'll have an insurrection that will then reverse whatever gain you think the market would have achieved. You have to carry the citizen along.
Look,
that's why I spoke of inclusive growth. Inclusive growth.
Okay, so Biti, I want to come back again to the point of booby traps
Why are you
within
laughing?
government.
This boy is laughing.
Because you're very passionate about it. So even the crew is can see you're passionate.
Having a good time.
Let's go back to
just
the
to Patrick and Mukanya.
the booby traps within government.
Yeah.
That if you're nascent and you're new in government, you don't understand these booby traps. And you were saying you were a helping hand in just navigating that. Let's just go back to that.
So number one, and this is, I was fortunate because I was a lawyer. You must know the law. Particularly, in my case, the Audit and Exchequer Act, the Constitution, later on the Public Finance Management Act, the Reserve Bank Act, the Revenue Act. You must know them, because anything you do with the support of the law, no one can question you. But the biggest booby trap in government is corruption. It's corruption. And yes, we did fantastic things. You were giving the figures. But I would like to submit that the greatest thing that I did, the greatest thing that we did, was something that we actually did not do, which was to accept bribes and corruption.
So I'm going to push back, and I'm going to make a different point, which is not necessarily to do with,
I was just
with corruption.
I'm just answering.
Let him finish.
Yeah.
Let him finish.
Then
I'll give you your space.
Yeah. Then
so that at least we conclude this thought.
The other thing is, I want to. There's a temptation, and you get women, mothers coming to your office. Please, I've got a child I've got a child in India. Yes.
So what? Honey traps?
No. I'll come to honey traps. Honey traps are. So I need honey traps are there, and I'll come to them.
Okay, we're not discussing honey traps.
No, but they're there. Smice is there, but I want to. I'll come to them.
Okay.
You get a situation where a genuine person will come with a genuine problem, and school fees was very common. I've got a child who's studying in Russia. She has been sleeping on the streets, or he has been sleeping on the streets. Can you help me, Minister?
Yeah, they must move to a local university.
So you resist the temptation of reducing the Ministry of Finance in what it is not,
to become a charity
welfare, and stick to the law. Everything goes to line ministries.
Okay.
Everything goes to line ministries. So that was but you must know how to navigate.
So when you're saying booby trap, it's, in my mind, it's people who are setting you up to fail, or they want you to, they're out to get you, and then they set out.
They are institutional booby traps.
Okay.
They're institutional booby traps, which will apply to any government, America, and so forth. Particularly finding yourself on the wrong side of the law, because you have given instructions.
So I want to talk about
where you are supposed not to give an instruction.
I like your theme of
So I want to give one example. I want to give one example. Remember, I was talking about the bonus. Then you interrupted. Yeah. So what happened was that we used to have a huge amount of money that would be in a singing fund, which we kept at the now defunct Standard Chartered Bank.
So it's not defunct; it was bought by FBC.
But it doesn't exist anymore.
It's not defunct.
Yeah.
I have friends at FBC. I'm not going to call it
so I was approached by a consortium of small banks, indigenous banks, Royal Bank, that bank. So I directed that, look, let's put money in this bank because we don't need it.
Okay.
We only need it to. But the accountant general, my Mazurira, she was like a guardian angel. She would come to my office around 7 p.m. when everyone is gone. And I learned that each time she came, she's gonna
Punish.
and give me advice. I mean, she's fun. She was fantastic.
Okay.
So she said, Minister, don't do what you want to do. I said, why? He says, these banks are poorly run and most of them are insolvent. So if you do this,
it's a problem.
these banks are going to collapse and it's going to fall.
Come back. Yeah.
And for sure, they collapse by and large. So over time, and then Willard Manungo would come to see me and say, Minister, I know you have a right to do this, the act, but on this one, please go and see the president. So I learned to navigate the terrain in knowing that there were some issues that I had to go to Mugabe. There were some issues that I had to be upfront with cabinet, fight with cabinet. There were some issues that I had to fight at the MDC caucus. But I discovered one thing, and I hope I won't have brickbats from my former colleagues. I used to present a paper called the Economics Odometer, which was a monthly review of the economy. And then I would have a press conference. So I discovered that Zimbabweans and their ministers don't read. So I would put anything and everything controversial in that paper. And then some people would then say, but you never brought this to us and so forth. But it was there, page 32. But the person who would read was the chief secretary to cabinet, Mishek Sibanda. Fantastic civil servant. I know he's just retired, but he was a fantastic civil servant. He was a fair man.
Okay.
He was a fair man. He would be the first one to say, yeah, but he did. Page 32 and so forth. So, ironically, I then discovered that the easiest way to hide things in Zimbabwe is to
write
put it in writing and publish the paper.
Okay.
Well, that's hilarious.
Because people don't read.
I don't know whether you're a fan of the late post-independence leader of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew. Right? He had this idea.
Yes.
And so I'm actually going to take it forward, ask you the question that when you are appointed Minister of Finance, right, and you look at your first pay slip as Minister of Finance, and you look at your last pay slip as a partner in a law firm that was quite successful, what's the ratio?
Oh my God.
Between what you were getting as Minister of Finance and a partner in, I think it was Honey and Black and Best when you became.
There's no comparison.
Right. It's like, it's a factor
So
of
then why are
10.
you doing it?
When I retired, I owned 23% of Honey and Black and Best. And this is the oldest law firm in the country and one of the wealthiest law firms in the country. So the loss of income, there's no comparison.
Yeah. So you were quite happy to take our civil servants from around about $1 a month to $100 to $500, right? Why didn't you do the same thing at the highest level? To say, you know what, if you're a minister, you're as good as the CEO of our biggest companies or practitioners in our biggest law firms. You must get paid the same.
Ministers were earning $100.
Yes.
The president was earning $100. Yeah. We only differentiated in 2012, 2013, when the president was now earning $4,000.
Yeah, but is the CEO of our biggest company or is a senior lawyer in the biggest law firm?
They must earn a lot more so that they're less corrupt.
You mean at that time?
Yeah.
No. I see where you're
because
coming from.
corruption.
No. It was no. I didn't want to create a gap, too much a gap that would create a chasm. So I see where you're coming from. Look, I don't think we could have afforded the huge salaries.
The argument is:
do you think
it will move the needle if ministers were paid commensurate with the responsibility that they were paid? Let's say, for example, $20,000
I think.
Do you think that there'll be less corruption within government?
I don't think.
Because does it make sense for a president
to
be on $4,000 a month?
Yeah, no. But let me answer the question. Let me answer the question. If I go back to the obligation in imperator of building a functioning economy. To some extent, we did that because we lowered inflation. You understand? I remember going to in March of 2009. I came out of prison. In July of 2008. So when I came out of prison, I went to Spa Ballantine Park with $100 to buy
groceries.
No, it was actually my dogs. I had some dogs, 3 dogs. Don't ask me their names.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Remember, there was remember there was a time when in 2008 there was a time when it was cheaper and easier to convert into the bearer and than to actually use
US.
So with my $100, I couldn't afford to buy the dog food because I hadn't done the conversion, which people. So I felt so angry. Then the GNU comes and I had a meeting with Ian Makoni. So I said to Ian Makoni, I will wait for you at Sam Levy's village. So I got into Bon Marché and I had like $100 and so forth. Then I said, let me just buy some groceries. And I filled an entire trolley with like $30 because most of the stuff was now like $1 for $2, $1 for $2, $1 for $2. So when you have a functional economy, $4,000 becomes a lot.
No, but is that fair remuneration for a president?
At the time, in this, yes,
it
was.
This is a guy running a $20 billion economy. Do you think that's reasonable for the guy in charge of a?
It was at that time. It was fair.
Babit, are you serious?
Look. You were complaining about the wage bill being one of the highest.
Yes, you.
But you were complaining. It's a contradiction in terms. So you want that?
Okay, so Biti, we talked about booby traps within government. What else could you warn, let's say, people going into the GNU in South Africa, in Kenya? We saw the troubles that we had in Kenya where you had Ruto. Part of it is just not understanding politics. So what I want to get from you is, how is that balance of knowing technical, where you have the technical ability to get things done, but you don't have the political will, or you're lacking the political will? How do you balance both so that you can drive a policy change or get things going?
Yeah, so 3 things. The first one is that an inclusive government starts off from a structurally challenged position because you are bringing competitors, enemies. Take if you were watching the South African election, uncomplimentary things were being said amongst the political, parties. Suddenly they are now in bed. So to transform psychological, and the ruling party always is a problem because it is the one that is giving. Because these ruling parties, these liberation movements, have got this mindset that we are entitled to govern. So they operate on three things: the couch of entitlement. We fought for you, we liberated you, therefore we're entitled to govern. So if someone comes, particularly someone that they consider a sellout, a puppet, they have a problem with acceptance. So at any given time, they are working to undermine you. So that's number one. Number two is that cabinet is so competitive. It's so competitive. And sometimes you can even compete from your own party. It's from your own party. So managing relations and ensuring that all of you are working for the collective good.
So just help us, because we're not politicians and we haven't been in cabinet. When you're saying it's very competitive and you're competing with someone within your own party, on what basis are you competing? If we were in class, we know we're competing for high marks. What are you competing against if you're in cabinet?
Look, there's naturally competition because it's just like parliament. Newspapers can be full of one individual or one minister, and don't think that doesn't have an effect on colleagues. It does have an effect. So you need to manage that. You need to manage that because it's uneven and unequal.
So publicity, you're competing for publicity?
Not that you're competing for publicity. It's not what you either of you set up to compete, but that's how it is. Yeah, that's how it is, and so forth. So it's a problem.
What else are you competing?
You are competing against time because 5 years moves very quickly. So first 2 years are okay. First 2 years, all eyes are focused on the ball. But after the second year, all of you are now thinking about the election 3 years later. So all of you are now repositioning yourselves now with the market of citizens that is going to vote you. It becomes destructive. So a GNU that doesn't deliver in the first 2 years will not deliver. Cyril Ramaphosa must know that.
And then third, are you also competing for attention from the principals as a minister?
What do you mean principals?
Like the president
the Prime
or
Minister.
the prime minister?
Yeah, in a way, I mean, what used to happen is that after every cabinet meeting, there will be a queue of ministers trying to see, President Mugabe. So, and remember, he's the appointing authority. Kwedu Edwachangirai, but Tuzanu is the appointing authority. So everyone knows that if I'm to be here the next 5 years, or if I'm to be promoted, reshuffled, so there's an unnecessary. And also part of the problem as well, and I was different. I almost resigned on 2 occasions.
Please tell us.
Yeah, the first occasion was that we didn't have money. We didn't have money. The things were tight. So it was in 2010. So we then took a decision that we can't make any increase of the wage. We can't make any increase of the wages to
the civil servants. Yeah.
Then President Mugabe, it was in June, went to Samail El Sheikh Resort.
That sounds like Egypt.
Egypt, yeah, for a meeting of the African Union. And then he was asked, are you going to give increase to civil servants? He said, yeah, we're going to give we're going to give increases to civil servants. So, I said already that I always took the hard issues to President Mugabe because I didn't want him to read in the newspaper So I afforded him that respect. And what I would do is I would go to the president and then I would immediately go to see Prime Minister Changirai.
Okay.
Normally at his residence, number 2 Linde ST, Strathaven, and say, guys, this is it. Because I wanted to give them their role as the leaders.
Okay.
So I was very upfront. Then to Moit, but I was very upfront to tell them the hard facts, to tell them the hard things. And generally, I was very open, even with the press. That's why I made that boop of saying with $323. I was very open because I found that if you carried people along, it helped. And part of the problem that President Ruto has faced is that economy is in serious problems. But he didn't carry the Wananchi along. And there's a backlog. So I tried to carry people along. So I then said to Mr. Manungo, the permanent secretary, my friend, I'm a senior partner at Anand Blackenberg. I was earning X amount in US dollars. I was 23% shareholder of Anand Blackenberg. What am I doing here? So he spoke to me very soberly. And said, look, the president, he said, Minister. So he said, Minister, you are doing a great job here. So it would be very sad if the country were to lose you here. And trust me, I've worked with so many ministers. He actually joined government in 1983. So he worked with Bernard Chidzero. Okay. So he says, look, we can't afford to lose you. However, you are overreacting. I said, why, Mr. Manu? He says, the president said we're going to increase salaries. He hasn't said by how much. 1% is an increase. And we did increases. We did $6, $7. That's what we ended up doing. $6 increase.
He sounds like your typical yes prime minister. You've watched the show.
But he's an amazing man.
He's a
Willard Manu
proper
is an amazing
bureaucrat.
civil servant. He is competent. He's professional, and he's fair.
So that's the one instant where you actually wanted to retire. You wanted to resign, and he managed to convince you to stick around.
Yeah, the second time it was during the time that we pulled out of the GNU.
Okay.
So we disengaged from the GNU on the 16th of October, 2009. Then we were summoned by SADC at an extraordinary meeting of SADC on the 5th of November. So in between, I had a big fight with the central bank. So I then was called to a meeting where the governor was there, where Maim Juru was there, Vice President Ngomo was there. He was the now Vice President. He had succeeded Msika. And Atham Tambara was there, and the Prime Minister was there. So those were the days that there was no love lost between myself and the Reserve Bank, myself and the Governor Gono. So we fight. And I was right. The law was with me. But none of them is on my side. Tambara says, you, Minister of Finance, you have got a lot to learn from. And so forth. So I said, but this is not worth it.
Let me walk away.
But Mugabe was clever. Mugabe then said, look, I'm appointing you, the Prime Minister, to
solve this,
deal with the rift between these two men. So that this was in November, December. So cabinet, as you know, and government, Mugabe used to go on leave in February. Yeah. So, and you asked me one of the reasons why my relations mellowed with the Governor Gono. So we early February, 3 February, the Prime Minister calls for that meeting between myself and Governor Gono. So I go to this meeting and I'm fully charged and so forth. So I was the first to arrive. Then Governor Gono followed. Then Governor Gono greets the Prime Minister. Chikona mombe makadi makazokurumbidza kubva ka. It's warm and it's cordial. You understand?
Yeah.
And it was so clear that they have
They have a relationship.
So I said, ndokutambiswa bhora risina mweya.
They know each other.
Because I'm the only one pushing Gono must go, Mandra. He was appointed outside. But these guys are...
They're friends.
Are friends. You understand? Yeah.
Yeah, Mafut, yeah.
They're actually related. They come from Bihira. Their homes are less than 4 kilometers.
Yeah.
So I realized, no. These people know each other. But in November, October, after that meeting, I went and wrote in my diary and said, look, I'll go back to Anne and Blackenberg. They're waiting for me. They love me there. I love being in court and so forth. But I must thank civil servants, the bureaucrats. People like Willard Manungo, people like Chipo Mini, who was the principal director for revenue. Fantastic women. People like Mai Makwaza, who was the director of International Cooperation and Finance, etc. The accountant general, Mrs. Madzorera, other directors, Mrs. Rusike, and so forth.
Okay. So tell me, within cabinet, who was the class monitor?
The Prime Minister chaired the Council of Ministers, you remember?
My principals, my teacher.
Yeah.
Amongst my ministers, class monitor, who's the clown of cabinet, who made jokes, who made everybody laugh.
I was very high up there because I could.
So you were the class monitor.
I'll tell you a story.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. 2010 comes. I love football or soccer. So I want to go and watch the World Cup. But I can't go and watch the World Cup because, number one, to be away from cabinet, you need leave of the president. Yeah, and also, I'm writing a budget, the midterm review. So I have to find an excuse. So we're in cabinet. And then someone just, I feel it was only the president, he just said something. And I walked out and banged the door. And Kasukwere, they were angry. You can't do that to our chief. Kasukwere, was a good friend of mine. I had an excellent relationship with him. Follows me. He said, Uruita. The people who knew this guy is going to South Africa to watch. And guess, do you know how many matches I watched in 2010? Live matches. 19 live matches.
Wow.
In the group stages.
It's like kindergarten. Cabinet is like kindergarten.
Yeah. So there were some moments. But they were very intelligent people. I mean, Professor Henry Dinuchwe, you just say, Your Excellency, I've got 2 points. And for sure, he had 2 points. Very smart man. Eric Martinenga, very smart man. A brilliant man. The former Minister of Finance, Yebet Morerwa, a brilliant man. People like Walter Mzembi, sharp people. You could see that. And 90%...
From the current crop, who impressed you? So from... Who was a minister then? Who's still a minister now?
The Emerson Pescale has got new people. The only old cards she has is Tembiso.
Nyoni, and she has moved. Okay.
Yeah, she's Tembiso. Yeah, but so he has gotten on with. But I feel that there are people that in a new construct must play a role in this country. This includes people like, Sevia Kasukwere. I've mentioned Arthur Mtambara. Elton Mangoma is a very competent man. His politics, he doesn't have a political instinct, but he's a competent man. I mean, the way he handled that Minister of Energy was fantastic. Yeah. Remember, he inherited the debt of 400 million euros.
True.
He created that. His only problem is that he has no limit. You make a decision. But he's one of those guys like Arthur Mtabara.
Babiti, this has been fantastic. You have no idea. What you've just done is you've just given us a masterclass in what it means to actually be in cabinet, what public policy what it actually involves. And for some of us, we learned quite a lot. This was superb. And we hope to see you here again. And to the audience, I hope that you guys have benefited as much as we've done. 2 parts that are explosive. And, I'm going to be listening to this session over and over again. I don't know, any last words for our audience, for everybody who's getting into public policy? Because now we have an understanding of actually how government works. So we now know what Mtuli is going through. We now know what John Mshayavan is going through. We now know what the president is going through. It's like kindergarten.
Okay, that's. I don't know whether that's the best characterization of what Biti has been telling us.
But anyway,
we'll give him the last word.
We'll give you the last word.
Well, just thank you for inviting me. It's so much rich history of that period. I think GNUs are going to be the order of the day. And I hope that Cyril gets it right. Cyril Ramaphosa gets it right, because GNUs are a pressure valve that releases political tensions. I was initially against that model, but I think that they can work if there's sufficient goodwill. And so I hope that your listeners and viewers and other people can learn something from our own uniquely Zimbabwean construct that we went through 2009 to 2013.
Thank you very much. To everybody, have yourself a wonderful evening and a great weekend. Otherwise, join us next Friday. Cheers.
Cheers.